Hello and welcome to the next postgraduate coursework webinar. Tonight we'll be talking about plant biotechnology. So I have with me Diane, who is one of the program coordinators for the degree, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about it. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Diane.
Thanks very much, Ari. It's really a pleasure for me to come and talk about the Plant Biotechnology postgraduate coursework programs at the University of Adelaide. So what is plant biotechnology? It's basically the biology of plants, but with an emphasis on the level of the molecule, the gene, and the cell, and particularly an emphasis on the application of biotechnology in agriculture and in other industries where plants are important. The program is not actually just one program, but three. There's a master's program. It takes 2 years. But if you just do the first year of coursework, then you earn a graduate diploma. If you just do the first half year of the first semester, then you would earn a graduate certificate. One of, I think, the pluses about this program is it's offered at the University of Adelaide's beautiful Wade campus. It's a beautiful place, not only in terms of its natural environment, birds and gardens and trees, but also the beautiful research facilities that it has for plant biotechnology and the excellent research that happens there in our field and that's known around the world. So this shows the program, the overview of the program. It's a very simple structure to this program. There is a number of courses and all students take all of the courses there. It's a carefully planned series of courses to introduce you to the area with a foundations course that will prepare you for what you'll encounter in the other courses. That's a full-time course. It runs for a couple of months, and then after that we'll do 2 courses at a time in parallel with each other, and they are on plant genomics, molecular plant breeding, techniques, that's entirely a lab-based course, applications of plant biotechnology, and then finally there's a course on regulation of plant biotechnology and a course on research concepts. Now that course on research concepts will really prepare you for the second year, which is when you do your own research project. So in the second year, there's just one big course, and it's the research project. If you do that entire program, it takes 2 years, and that leads to a Master of Biotechnology in Plant Biotechnology. Of course, if you do a shorter version, you could get either a diploma or a certificate. Programs are really quite flexible. You could start with one of the short programs, and if you like it, transfer to stay through for the master's, or you could start with the master's, and if another opportunity comes along or something changes in your life, you can switch to one of the shorter programs. If I'm asked what is really special about this program, I think it's really its focus on research. Most of the students who come to us because they do want to do research, and we really emphasize research preparation in the program. And that's not just in the second year when you're doing your research project. It's throughout the first year as well, where the courses have been designed to provide you with the academic background, the subject matter background that you need to do research in plant biotechnology, but also some of the skills to search the literature for prior research information, to critically evaluate scientific papers, to communicate through scientific posters, scientific writing, and also the techniques that you'll learn, not just in the techniques course, but in all of the courses that have practical components. You'll really be well prepared when you reach the second year and you start your own research project. When you do your research project in the second year, you'll have a supervisor. So you will have a very experienced researcher, sometimes often a world-leading researcher in their field, who will oversee and guide you in developing a project, doing the project, and writing it up into a manuscript-style thesis. So quite a short thesis, but again, with a real research skill in mind, learning to write a scientific paper. During that second year, there are also workshops that you'll do with the other plant biotechnology students to learn how to do those things, how to prepare a proposal, how to give a seminar, how to write a paper, and how to manage a project. Another thing that I think is pretty special about our program is the international diversity of both the students and the staff that are teaching this program. You can see all the countries up there. These are the countries from which we've had students in the past, and or from which we have staff teaching into the program. And it's a really good opportunity to interact with people who have different backgrounds, not just culturally different backgrounds, but they often have scientifically different backgrounds as well. And we like to foster an environment where people are learning from each other. Another important part about plant biotechnology is it's not just science and biology for curiosity's sake, but we're really interested in the applications of that science. And so very often, the projects that the students do in their second year and the things that people learn about in their courses in the first year are really relevant to issues that matter to the industry. And plants, of course, are important in agriculture. They're important in horticulture. They're important in the environment, and they're important for human health. And so some examples I've put up here are just a few examples of areas in which students have done projects in the past. So looking at the genetic basis for tolerance to stresses like salt and drought, developing tools that can be used in plant breeding, looking at new plants for making biofuels, looking at the characteristics of plant fibers for human health, and looking at plant genetic diversity. Those are just a few of the examples of kind of real-world areas that our students are doing projects in. And what I find is that when the students choose their project and their supervisor, and they do that during the first year of the program, they're often looking at it from the point of view of the application. That's really, I guess those are the kinds of students that we attract. The entry requirements for this program basically require a bachelor's degree. You don't require an honors degree or prior research experience. We're looking for students who have a good academic standing, at least what we call a credit, which would be a GPA of 5 out of 7 or greater. If you're wondering about what a relevant area of science is, I'm basically the one that reviews the applications, and I look to see whether you've taken some plant biology, plant science before, and whether you've taken some genetics before. And so you can imagine if that's what I'm using as a criterion, we have people with lots of different backgrounds, people who study agriculture and want to get into biotechnology, people who study biotechnology and want to learn about plants. So it's pretty flexible, and we actually enjoy having students who have different backgrounds. International applicants, the criteria are the same for international applicants as for Australian applicants, the only difference being that you have to have proof of English language proficiency, and for 2018, the standard that's required will be 6.5 overall and at least 6 in all 4 bands.
Beautiful. I'll just step in quickly there. One additional thing to note is that if you are a domestic student, so in that case you're an Australian citizen, Australian permanent resident, or a citizen of New Zealand, you actually apply through the South Australian Tertiary Admissions Centre, otherwise known as SATAC. So if you go on there now, you'll notice that applications have actually closed for the degree for this year. So the next admission cycle for the degree will be at the start of next year if we're looking at the master's level. For international students, you actually apply directly to the university. So if you go to our international student page, you'll see a link to the application portal there. So it is a completely separate application process for both domestic and international students. Now, I had another quick question for you, Diane. In terms of the research focus in this degree, is it necessary, you mentioned you don't have to do honours, but is it necessary to do any sort of substantial research components or pre-arrange anything at the university?
No, it isn't. Unlike a research master's degree or a research-based PhD where you arrange for a project and a supervisor before you come, for this program, you simply apply for the program. And once you get here, and when you say next year, will be possible to apply for 2018, of course. So you would come here in end of February, beginning of March, start taking courses, and sometime around, say this time of year, we'd start talking about what kind of project you want to do, and kind of matchmake you with the right lab. There's lots of labs and lots of scientists on the Wake campus doing plant biotechnology research, so I've never had trouble placing our students into a good match for their interests. And so that means it's something you don't have to arrange in advance. And in fact, you can't really arrange it in advance.
Brilliant. No worries. I'll stop interrupting.
Okay.
Well, you may not have noticed, but we actually have an empty chair, which will now be filled by our industry guest, James. Sorry, that was really embarrassing.
Thank you.
No worries. You're welcome to get started. You're welcome.
Okay, I'm really pleased to introduce James. James is a graduate of the University of Adelaide, not this program, but he's certainly studied in very close areas to this. He's going on to make his career as the molecular breeding lead, and I think he'll probably tell you what that is, for Australian Grain Technologies. Australian Grain Technologies is Australia's largest plant breeding company. But to us at the University of Adelaide, it's more than that, because it partly grew out of our own wheat breeding program. And as I said, the Wake campus is a wonderful place, and there are many research organizations based on the Wake campus, and that includes the head office of AGT. So James, I'll let you talk about your work.
Great. Thanks very much, Diane, for the kind introduction. So what I'm here to talk about is essentially the grains industry, but how Australian Grain Technologies influences that. In particular, our role in producing new varieties that will be grown by farmers to improve their prosperity. Through this talk, I will try and do justice to Australian Grain Technologies, who we are and what we do. I'll talk a little bit about myself, my story, and how I got to where I am. And then I'll finally wrap up with a little bit of industry overview and where I think the industry is going into the future. So, first, as you can see down the bottom of your screen, you can follow Australian Grain Technologies on all the social pipelines. But essentially what we do is we breed new varieties, in particular in wheat, barley, durum and lupins. In other words, we produce bread, beer, pasta and plant protein.
Best things in the world.
That's right. We pride ourselves on accuracy and precision, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. Essentially, what we do is provide varieties, but we generate an income based on how productive those varieties are for farmers. In other words, if a farmer grows our variety and it becomes successful, we get a small proportion of income off of their sales, and we reinvest that back into our business, and that grows our business. Currently, in Australian Grain Technologies, we process around 50,000 DNA samples per annum, and we genotype these with 4 to 5 markers per sample in traditional marker-assisted selection. But on top of that, we are moving into genomic selection, where we would do a whole genome profile, and we would do this with around 2,000 to 20,000 SNPs across the entire genome. On top of the genomics, we also look at yield selection, where we're currently running around 300,000 plots at 54 locations around Australia. On top of that, we do disease-resistant screening and quality tests. One of the interesting things about AGT, in particular the Roseworthy site where I'm based, is that half of our staff are University of Adelaide graduates. So as Diane alluded to, we have a strong relationship with our research partners in the University of Adelaide, and we're committed to education, in particular for producing the next frontier of plant breeders and researchers. We also are involved in honours and PhD projects where we have links such as with Diane's group. And I'll just give a little bit of a brief on a couple of our current PhD students. As you can see, your genes plus your environment creates you. In other words, your phenotype is your genetic makeup plus the environment. So one of our PhD students works in genomic selection, which is basically looking at the whole genome and creating a prediction value of a plant line in terms of how it may yield or what its quality profile would be. Another one of our PhD students works on high throughput phenotyping, or looking at how a plant copes with its environment. So you can see on the right of your screen there that we want to look intrinsically at grain yield, but we want to look at the factors that actually cause grain yield. So through digital imaging and laser technology on the tractor there, you can see in the picture, we're essentially measuring grain yield, flowering time, the head number, and we're also looking at the biomass and height of the plant, which essentially is correlated with yield. So a little bit about myself. As Diane said, I'm from the University of Adelaide. I did the Bachelor of Science, Agricultural Science, and I majored in plant molecular biology and plant breeding. I then went on to do honours at the University of Adelaide, looking at rice biofortification to improve human nutrition. Since then, I actually worked in the same lab where Diane is, in the molecular marker program for essentially what our objective was is doing marker-assisted selection for wheat and barley programs. And this led me to my current role in AGT as one of, I guess, one of the key people in the senior leadership groups. And what this means, what is a molecular plant breeder? Essentially, I spend half my time on a breeding program, running my own breeding program, and the other half of my time on molecular markers. So there's a couple figures to your right. You can see a bell curve. So breeding is essentially a numbers game, and we want to select the best performing lines, and ways that we can do that is using DNA selection through molecular markers. So we want to push the genetics in a forward direction and essentially shift that bell curve forwards. One of the other parts of my role is also I'm involved in projects, not just in genetics, but also including genetic R&D. And we have collaborators internationally, nationally, and I'm in the fortunate position where I can attend conferences, both national and international, and join in on industry meetings. You can also see a graph in the bottom right of your screen. What this is the improvement in sequencing over time in terms of dollar or how much it costs to genotype something. So just around 10 years ago, For example, the human genome costs around $14 million. Last year, the big two battled for the $1,000 human genome, and more recently, Illumina, one of those big two, has developed what's called the NovaSeq, and they are aiming to produce the $100 human genome. All this technology is transferable to agribiotech, and it's a bright future, in my opinion. And I continually study as part of my role at AGT. So the grains industry. If you look at the top right of your screen, the winter grain crop is essentially grown on 23 million hectares in Australia, and the gross value of production is $14 billion. Of that $14 billion, if you look at the next figure, half of that is accounted for by wheat. Then it goes on to barley, pulses, oilseeds, and so on. So you can see where AGT is investing in breeding and potentials into the future. I won't go into too much detail, but below that is the breeder's equation. Now, at the start of the talk, I discussed genomic selection as well as phenotyping. Delta, or genetic gain, is essentially the equation here shows that if you make wide crosses through germplasm exchange, if you increase the speed of phenotyping through imaging, being able to do it more accurately and more precisely, but also increase heritability through genomic selection, marker-assisted selection. And then if you divide that by the cross-to-cross, or the generation time, how fast can we push plants? If you increase the speed of the life cycle through speed breeding or genomic selection, this all has an impact on genetic gain. AGT currently has a genetic gain in wheat of about 1% per year. That doesn't sound a lot, but a variety is released on average. Every year we release varieties, but from the initial cross to when it becomes a variety is about 10 years. So over that time, we have made about 10% genetic gain. Now, if I speculate about the future, the UN, through the FAO, has said that we need about 70% more food produced by 2050 in order to feed the extra 2.5 billion people. Not only that, we have to do it more efficiently, using scarce natural resources and adapting to climate change. I see molecular plant breeding as increasingly valuable to the grains industry. Not only that, all the international players listed there are investing heavily in their R&D into the genomics in plant sciences and plant breeding. I also see an increasing demand for bioinformaticians or biostatisticians, and they're then needing to develop novel ways of analysing megadata to improve profit. What I mean by megadata is the data that comes out of, say, genomic selection or high throughput phenotyping. Further, R&D investment into breeding will essentially cover a lot of areas, but I'm in particularly interested in the omics, so genomics and proteomics, etc., etc. We need to be able to accurately and in a high throughput manner and at a reduced cost, essentially profile each line that's going through to become a variety. There's also going to be an investment in digital agriculture and big data. And the GRDC have a strategic plan to co-invest in R&D and extension in the grains industry going forward. So the way that they will co-invest will be through industry, such as plant breeders, and also through researchers, and working collaboratively to improve varieties for the greater good. And I just wanted to finish with the final slide. I think genomics is the fastest changing field in breeding. We have next generation breeding using genomic selections, markers, high throughput phenotyping, and we need enabling technologies and genetic resources. And if you're interested in plant biotech, there's opportunity to be involved in high impact science.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. So we do have time for questions now. Now, I will just remind those of you who are listening that if you do have any more questions that have popped up, we've already got a few that have come through. But if you do have any more, click on the Q&A button on the top left-hand side of your screen and type up there. One of the things that I think is a really good takeaway message from today that's come through in both sections of the presentation is that plant biotechnology is a rapidly evolving field. And I think you'll find that with those sorts of objectives set with a 70% worldwide increase in the food production rates, it's going to be a field that will be constantly changing. And I like what James said earlier about the fact that he needs to constantly keep studying to keep up on top of what everyone else is doing, not just what his company is doing. So it seems like this is a good profession for people who are really interested in always being challenged and always looking ahead rather than doing repetitive processes. And I think that comes through quite strongly with the research-based focus. It's preparing you with those skills that you can then use to continue on in that sort of a career trajectory. So we've got another question that's popped in. That's excellent. So we'll start off with the first question that's come up, and I suspect this might be a James question. The question is, what advice do you have for people who are looking for their first job after the master's degree? Knowing that you didn't do that master's degree, but in general, what would you advise for people breaking into the industry?
Yeah, I guess in general, rather than looking at what you do after completing the master's, I'd say what you do during masters, and that is to form relationships with key industry partners or researchers who you would like to work with going forward. I think that's a good strategy to essentially line up a job prior to even finishing.
I think that's really good advice, James. And the program offers you a good setting for doing that, because in your second year of the program, you will be doing your research project in a real research lab, and many of our research labs are doing research that's in partnership with industry or in some cases funded by the industry, and almost always aiming at an outcome that industry will use. So you will have those opportunities at the Wake campus, and it's a good idea to make use of them while you're in the program.
Absolutely. I think this is a thing that resonates quite well with most programs, is that if you're thinking about what to do at the end and you're at the end, it's already too late. When it comes to postgraduate study, you want to be trying to put yourself out there as much as possible to engage with industry as often as you can. And the Wake campus is a fantastic background for that. If you do ever have the chance to come down to the Wake campus, it is just off Crossroad. There are a series of different research institutes based on the campus, covering a broad range of fields from viticulture all the way through to some very specialised fields in agriculture. So it's a great way for you to network with industry as well. Now we'll jump along to the next question, which is definitely a Diane question. The question is, can the degree be studied part-time?
Yes, the degree can be studied part-time, so that's an easy question for me to answer. But if you don't remember the structure that I explained about the degree, that it's a series of courses, you really should take them in order, which would mean that you could come and do full-time for, say, March and April 1 year and do the first course. And if you wanted to be part-time after that, that would be possible. And you can mix up the order of the courses a little bit, as long as you really do that first introductory one first. And we have had part-time students in the past.
Brilliant. And I think the takeaway message here is that then, so if you are interested in doing part-time study, talk to us when you're in the application process, and we can lay down the foundations for you to make sure that you're aware of when would be required for that full-time level study, and then switching down to part-time. And that should give you plenty of time to negotiate that with work as well, just to make sure that you've organised any sort of relevant study leave if you are currently looking at doing it through that pathway. But this does feed quite nicely into our next question, which is how many contact hours per week are there? So we'll go for a full-time study load in this case.
Okay, so if you're a full-time student, then there's probably varies a little bit from course to course, but it's probably about 30 hours a week of contact. So that might be when you're taking the one big course at the beginning, or spread across 2 courses in the rest of the program. But we do expect that full-time means full-time, and it's not just the contact time that matters. There are assessment tasks to be done outside, and group projects, etc. And so we advise students that they should be thinking of being able to devote 48 hours a week to their studies.
Absolutely. And I think you'll find as well that as you go into that second year of the master's degree with that research project, although the face-to-face time might reduce, the amount of research-based time will drastically increase.
Yes, again, it's full-time.
It's full-time. Okay. Now, this question was slightly answered before, but we'll address it. So we've got a question from someone who's done a science degree from a different field of science and is thinking about moving into plant biotechnology. So is there some sort of bridging pathway that they could take?
Well, I think it depends on how far away that other science degree was. If it's got, like, let's say, enough relationship that you've taken something about plant biology before, and you've taken something about genetics before, then you probably are ready for this. So you'll find that we can suggest some reading to do in advance of the first course to help you prepare for the program. If, on the other hand, you have a degree in physics or something where you haven't got any biology, then you would want to be doing some kind of bridging preparation in the area of basic biology, plant science of some type, and some genetics.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we have one last viewer question as a reminder. If you do want to ask those questions, pop them in the Q&A panel on the top left. But the last question is, can completing this master's degree provide a pathway to doing a PhD?
Oh, yes. We find that many of our students actually choose this program because that's what they want. They would like to come study a PhD at the University of Adelaide or elsewhere. We'd like to have them do a PhD, but perhaps they don't have any research experience yet. And so this program provides a very good pathway. And in fact, probably that's the destination that the largest number of our students have ended up, but certainly not the majority. People have gone on to a variety of different careers, but it's certainly a very good pathway.
Perfect. Now, I actually have one last question to close it up since we haven't had any more used ones, and this one is for James. So, James, can you tell us about one of your favourite projects that you've worked on over the years, the one that was the most interesting or the most exciting that you've worked on over the last few years?
Wow, okay. Yeah, there's been quite a number of projects. I guess one that springs to mind is a more recent one, and that is about the application of targeted sequencing to breeding, so marker-assisted selection through sequencing.
And was that a lengthy project?
Yes, it was a lengthy project, only because I spent probably 10% of my time on this.
Yeah.
So that was in collaboration with our industry partners in Limgrain internationally, and a couple other labs locally. And yeah, it's been a fascinating project, and there are a lot of other projects that AGT are involved in.
Brilliant. Well, that wraps us up for today. So thank you, Diane, for providing a strong understanding of the degree, and thank you, James, for providing an insight into the transition into full-time work in the industry, as well as giving us a bit of an idea of where things are heading in the future. If you are interested in learning a bit more about plant biotechnology and the degrees, you can jump onto our website, adelaide.edu.au, and search for Plant Biotechnology on there. It'll have a really detailed breakdown of the degrees. On top of that, if you're interested in attending any future webinars, you can go to adelaide.edu.au/info night and register for those as well.